Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 202 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we do have an interesting assortment of animals. We have got a fish, we've got a couple squirrels. I know we had a couple episodes ago, part 200, we had a few squirrels, but now we've got even more squirrels. Very cool little group of rodents I do quite like. Some birds, and we've got some other mammals as well. So we're going to start with the fish today. So Jay Quadix is back with another really cool fish. He made the Queen Angelfish. So let's have a look at one of these guys. So let's go in here and have a looky-loo. So there's one right over here. So this is the Queen Angelfish. So they're called Holocanthus chilaris, also known as the golden angelfish or the yellow angelfish. They're a species of marine angelfish that lives in the western Atlantic Ocean. So in terms of their taxonomy, they were first described as Chiodon chilaris by Carl Linnaeus, and then they're given the type locality as western Atlantic/Caribbean. And their name means, Holactus is the other name, it means full, spine, and chilaris means fringe, so the fringe full spine. That's kind of where it got its name from. Marine angelfish in the genus Holocanthus likely emerged about 10 million years ago, or 10 to 7 million years ago, and the most basal species is the Ghanaian one that lives in West Africa, but these guys would have colonized the ocean, colonized the Atlantic from the Indian Ocean, and then the closure of the Isthmus of Panama led to the splitting of some of these tropical species. And these guys can be found pretty much across the Caribbean and into like the Atlantic coast of South America. It's really beautiful. So you can see they've got very interesting colour to them. They are quite broad, flattened, oval-shaped body with a triangular fin, quite a dull snout and a small mouth that has lots of bristle-like teeth. The dorsal fin contains about 14 spines and 19 to 21 soft rays, while the anal fin has 3 spines and 20 to 21 soft rays. They reach a maximum length of about 45 centimeters, or about 18 inches, so quite a decent-sized fish, and weigh about 1,600 grams, or 56 ounces, with males being larger than females. The species you can see is covered in yellow-tipped blue-green scales with a brighter yellow tail, pectoral, and pelvic fins, and both the dorsal and anal fin have orange end points as well, and on the forehead it's got like an eye-like spot called a crown. It's cobalt blue and electric blue outer ring on its eyes as well. It's a main feature that actually distinguishes it from other species. And the juveniles are dark blue with a bright ventral stripes in the yellow pectoral area, so the babies look very different from the adults, which is very interesting. And there are some colour morphs known, but they're still considered the same species. In terms of ecology, they are found in tropical and subtropical areas of western Atlantic Ocean and the coast of the islands of the Americas. They occur from Florida along the Gulf of Mexico down into the Caribbean Sea and Brazil. They are benthic or bottom dwelling and occur in shallow waters close to shore at depths down to about 70 meters. And they live in coral reefs, preferring soft corals and either living alone in pairs. And in terms of their life cycle, or what they eat sponges, tunicates, jellyfish, corals, plankton, and algae, with juveniles acting as cleaner fish and will remove ectoparasites from bigger fish. In some areas they have diet of mostly sponges, depending where they are, but they do seem to be selective feeders. But generally they're pretty generalist in that regard, they eat a lot of things. So in terms of their life cycle, they do have large territories. Males have large territories and have a harem of about 2 to 4 females. And little is known about the sexual development of the species, so they're presumed to be polygamous hermaphrodites, the largest harem female transforming into the male if the male that had the territory disappears or dies. And around midday they tend to forage individually in different locations, and the male tends to each of them, rushing around, circling and feeding next to them. In spawning with the species occurs year-round. It is observed sometimes in the full moon. It's a very interesting courtship. So the courtship involves the male showing his side to the female and flicking his pectoral fins or soaring above them. At the beginning of the spawning, the female will swim towards the surface and the male, where we're going to pressing against her vent as well, and then releases the eggs and deposits everything in the water. The eggs are pelagic, and they remain suspended in the water for about 20 hours. The hatched larvae have a large yolk sac and no functional eyes, gut or fins, but 2 days later the yolk is absorbed and they start to resemble more of a fish, and the larvae of the plankton eaters tends to grow quite quickly. And between the ages of 3 to 4 weeks, they have reached about 20 millimeters, or just under an inch. They descend to the floor as juveniles, and juvenile anglerfish live alone in territories encompassing finger sponges and corals where they establish cleaning stations for other fish. So in terms of their human interactions, they are not normally eaten or commercially fished, but they are caught mostly for the aquarium trade as they're quite valuable. And as juveniles, they can adapt to eating aquarium food and actually are quite good at adapting to aquarium life compared to other individuals like adults, which have more specialized diets. They're in Brazil. They're the most common marine ornamental fish sold abroad. Though, there's only issues, taking them out of the wild and things like that. They can be caught in the eastern Adriatic Sea of Croatia because of introductions, probably because of the aquarium trade. That's a bit of a worry, but overall they are doing okay. They are considered least concern, I believe. Yep, they are considered least concern, but another really cool fish, and another one awesome done by J Aquatics, so did a bloody beautiful job of that. So we're going to move on. We've got another Great Cakes mod. Great Cakes mod only has 2 mods today, so that's a nice change for everything. So let's have a look at the next one here. So we've got here the Tufted Puffins. Let's have a look at these guys. That helps, but it's not what I wanted. So you've got the Tufted Puffin. So Great Cakes mod, or Phalocula's gelato, was the Tufted Puffin. Also known as the Crested Puffin. They're an abundant, medium-sized pelagic seabird from the Orca family. So that's a little bit awkward, but they're found throughout the North Pacific Ocean. They're one of 3 species of puffin that make up the genus Phalocula, and are usually recognized by the yellow tufts and their thick red bill. So in terms of description, they get to about 35 centimeters or 14 inches in length, with a similar wingspan, around 3/4 of a kilogram. Weigh about 3/4 of a kilogram. It makes them the largest of all the puffins. Birds of the western Pacific population tend to be somewhat larger than the eastern ones, and male birds tend to be slightly larger than females. You can see their body's mostly black, but they do have a little bit of very similar to other puffin species, but they have a very thick beak, which is primarily red with some yellow, and occasionally green marks. The most distinctive feature is these are the yellow tufts, though, that appear annually on the birds of both sexes as the summer reproductive season approaches. Their faces will then become bright as their face becomes bright white in the summer, and during feeding seasons they tuft molts and the plumage loses a lot of its luster. Along with other relatives, it has relatively short wings, adapted for diving, underwater swimming, and catching prey rather than gliding, of which they are incapable. As a consequence, they have thick, dark, myoglobin-rich breast muscles, adapted for fast and aerobic strenuous wind-beat cadence, and actually can maintain it for quite a long period. In juveniles, tufts resemble winter adults, but they have a grey-brown sound to them, and a shallow, yellowish-brown beak. And overall, they resemble kind of like an unmarked rhinoceros anklet, so that's quite interesting as well. But we'll get into them a little bit more shortly. So they were first described by 1769 by Peter Simon Pallas, and the scientific name Phalocula comes from the medieval Latin facula, which is friar, which is a reference to their plumage, which resembles monk robes, and the curly head for curvus, which means curl of hair. So that's another interesting name for them as well. But in terms of where they breed and where they live, the tuft puffins form dense breeding colonies during the summer reproductive season from Washington State to British Columbia, throughout southern Alaska and the Aleutian Islands, the Kamacha, the Sea, and of Kersh as well, so all those kind of areas. And while they share some habitat with horned puffins, the range of the tuft puffin is generally a bit more eastern. They are also been known to nest in small numbers as far south as in northern Channel Islands, the coast of southern California. However, the last sighting there was in 1997. And they typically prefer to select islands that are or cliffs that are inaccessible to predators, close to productive waters, and high enough they can take off the air successfully. Ideal habitat is steep but relatively soft soil, substrate, and grasses for burrows. And during the winter feeding season, they spend almost of their time at sea, extending their range from the North Pacific to the south of Japan and California. So quite a wide range they've got. So we'll have a look at the baby when we go on about breeding, because these guys look quite funky, if I do say so myself. So in terms of breeding, the breeding takes place on isolated islands, with over 25,000 pairs being recorded on a single colony off the coast of British Columbia. The nests are usually a simple burrow done with the bill and feet, but sometimes I'll use a crevice between rocks instead. They are well lined with vegetation and feathers. Courtship will often occur through skyporting, strutting, and billing, and then once they've courted, the single egg is laid. They're usually in June and incubated by both parents for about 45 days, and the eggs are pure white or pale buff without gloss, and they're very often actually barely perceptible shell markings of dull purplish colours. And in fledglings, once they hatch and then grow up, they tend to leave the nest between 40 to 55 days. And tough puffins may be purely aquatic locomotive animals until they are 3, living entirely as marine animals and returning only to shore to breed. And when they hatch, and they tend to be well offshore when hatching. So in terms of their diet, they feed on quite a variety of fish and marine invertebrates, as we have a look at one swimming, so that's perfect, which they catch from diving from the surface. However, their diet varies greatly with age and location. So adult puffins tend to largely depend on invertebrates, such as squid and krill. Nestlings at coastal colonies tend to eat a lot of fish, such as sandglass and rockfish. Or nestlings at colonies closer to pelagic habitats tend to depend more on invertebrates. And demersal fish are often consumed at quite a big quality by most nestlings, suggesting they feed at some extent to the ocean bottom. And feeding can be located far offshore as the nesting areas, and they can store large quantities of fish in their bills, which is quite interesting as well, and carry them to their chicks. So they don't regurgitate it to their chicks, they tend to pretty much just hold it in their beaks, which is interesting. So in terms of their predators and threats, tough puffins are preyed upon by various avian raptors, such as snowy owls, bald eagles, and prairie-green falcons, but also mammals like Arctic foxes. Foxes seem to prefer the puffins over other birds, making the birds a main target, and that's why they choose inaccessible cliffs and entirely mammal-free islands to protect themselves, while just laying eggs and burrows is effective from protecting them from scavengers like gulls and ravens. There was a massive die-off of puffins on St. Paul Island, Alaska, between October 2016 and January 2017, and has been attributed to ecosystem changes resulting from climate change. That's a little bit sad. But they have been quite important to the cultures of people up there. The Inuit and Inuli people of North Pacific traditionally hunt them for food and feathers, though it is now considered mostly illegal or is discouraged to hunt them throughout their range. And they are quite a familiar bird on the Russian Pacific coast, known as the tonopuk, or small axe. And the oldest tough puffin was about 6 years old when discovered in Alaska, the same state where it was banded. And there is some areas that they've been conserved, like they are protected. I believe they're considered least concern, but some areas they are protected just to protect the populations and things like that. And some of the big areas and reserves have been trying to protect them really well. So yeah, another really cool species. Great Cakes mod, another awesome one there, another winner. So next up, we are going to have a look at some leaf mods. As I mentioned, it's all squirrels from now for a little bit. So we've got 3 species of squirrels that we get to talk about. So we're going to have a look at this species here. This is the Albus squirrel. That's a juvenile. We'll have a look at the adult. This is an adult? Yeah, that's an adult. There's an Albert squirrel. It is also known as the tassel-eared squirrel. These are a type of squirrel that are native to the southern Rocky Mountains from the US and the Sierra Madre Occidental in Mexico, and can be found in Arizona, New Mexico, and southwestern Colorado. And they are closely associated with, or largely confined to, mature Pontane Postera pine forests. And they got their name to honour the American naturalist John James Abert. And there are 9 different subspecies recognised, but not getting to them. So, as we mentioned, that taxonomy, there are 9 recognised subspecies, but we're not getting into them. So, in terms of their physical characteristics, Albert squirrels are about 46 to 58 centimetres long, with a tail about 19 to 25 centimetres. They're easily recognisable by their long ear tufts, which extends up to about 2 to 3 centimetres above their ears. This gives them a striking resemblance to the Eurasian red squirrel, aside from its darker colours. So Albert squirrel vary in colour across their range, with most populations having a grey coat with a reddish stripe down their back and dark stripe and white underbelly. Some lack the stripe and some are fully grey underbellies, and there's some areas where they have a fully black morph, so it just depends on where you are. So Albert squirrels are confined to the Colorado Plateau and the southern Rocky Mountains of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, and the range does extend into Mexico as well, where they live in Postera pine, and these have been transplanted to Santa Carolina mountains in Arizona and established stable populations there that they currently have historically. So the habitat, as you mentioned, they make almost exclusive use of the Postera pine for cover, nesting, and food. In Mexico, where they're abundant, are absent, they found strands of the closely related Pinus Arizona. So optimum squirrel habitats is all aged Postera pine, with trees in ever aged groups, densities of 168 to 250 trees per acre, or 150 to 200 square feet per acre. An optimum habitat, that's kind of the average. The average diameter of the pine is 11 to 13 inches, with Gamble oaks 11.8 to 14 inches as well. And in central Arizona, they do have ranges of about 18 acres, or about 7 hectares on average, but range from 10 to 24, or 4 to 9 hectares as well, with ranges being somewhat smaller in the winter, and this means their range, in spring and summer gets bigger, and it kind of contracts as they kind of get colder. But also, subadult males have home ranges about 27 acres, or about 11 hectares. Adult females have somewhat larger homes and ranges than adult males, so it's interesting as well. In terms of their plant communities, as I mentioned, they closely live with these Postera pine ones, and they're most extensive between 5,500 and 8,500 feet in elevation. So that's kind of where you kind of find them. But they like old pine forests and things like that. They are considered least concern, but nonetheless in Mexico, most of the areas that they live is logged, and they are considered vulnerable down there, but most other areas they are doing okay. So in terms of their ecology and behavior, they are diurnal, so they often are active for a short amount of time between sunrise and active for periods throughout the day, and they usually rest and shelter before sunset. Albert squirrels do not store food, as of other North American squirrels do, and it's most apparent that the mortality is for these guys is injuries and short food shortages that lead to their mortality. So in terms of the babies, let's have a look if we can find a baby. We had a baby, so where is it? Let's see if we can find it. There, everyone. Went up to say hi. So in central Arizona, breeding occurs from May 1st to June 1st, and there's young between June 10th and June 27th. And July 27th. They have about a 46-day gestation period, with 8 litters being comprised of about 2 to 5 young each, and 3 or 4 young per litter is typical. Young Albert squirrels are born naked, with their eyes and ears closed. In 2 weeks, thin, short hairs will start to be noticeable, and then by 6 weeks, their eyes have opened and they've got their pelt. By week 7, the tail is broadened and is held over the back, the ears held erect. And museum mushrooms and bark may be added to the diet at this time. And then captive young females tend to venture about 7 weeks, but do not go to the ground until about 9 weeks. At about 10 weeks of age, these squirrels are matured, and mature sizes have reached about 15 or 16 weeks of age. And they typically only have 1 litter per year, but in some areas they can have 2 litters in southern parts of their range. In terms of nesting, the nests are built by the female Albert squirrel out of pine twigs that are typically less than 1 centimeter in diameter, or less diameter of 6 to 14 inches long, and they nest with all sorts of variety of materials. They use different cavities and different types of trees to make these nests, and they tend to most often build them on the southern side or southeastern side of these trees. It's quite interesting as well. These nests tend to be roughly spherical, with a small platform often extending beyond the bowl edge. They often will move the litter to a larger nest when the young are about 3 to 6 weeks of age. In winter, pairs of usually an adult female and a subadult will kind of share the nest and shelter. So as you mentioned before, they consume Postera pine year-round. They eat parts that include the seeds, which are only highly preferred, the inner bark, the bulbs, the stalagmite buds, the temporal buds, and the pollen cores. And they also eat fleshy fungi, carrion, bones, and antlers as well, so they tend to rely on them. They tend to produce large cone crops every 3 to 4 years, with cones virtually absent out of 1 year out of 4. Albert squirrels begin eating immature seeds shortly after development begins in late May, and these seeds are eaten throughout the summer as the cones mature. Seeds from up to 75 cones may be eaten per day per squirrel, and so that's one of their major food. And the seeds are disseminated from cones at October and November, and they continue to consume and kind of mature them as well. So that's quite important for them. And water is mostly obtained from their food, but Albert squirrels sometimes drink from stock ponds or standing water. And in terms of predators, they get preyed upon by northern goshawks, other hawks as well. They also get preyed upon by grey fox, bobcats, coyotes, potentially, but there's no real evidence of it. But they would be a good, nice little snack for them. Yeah, another really cool little species. So that's the Albert squirrel. Really, really cute little guy. I like that we're getting more squirrels. There's definitely a large variety of squirrels that we could get in the game, which are quite awesome. Anyway, so let's carry on. So we've got another species of squirrel coming up. We have got the black squirrel, the Calabrian black squirrel. So let's have a look at this one over yonder. Where are you? There you are. So very similar. So these guys are found in the regions of Calabrian and Basilicata, in the south of the Italian peninsula. So we're going to Europe for these guys. And they're endemic there, so they're only found there and nowhere else, and the name is Squirrelus meteoralis. And they were long considered to be a subspecies of the red squirrel, but studies in 2019 and 2017 revealed that the genetics and morphology is quite different, so that's led them to actually be described as a different species. So in terms of their description, they are arboreal animals that generally resemble the red squirrel in its behaviour, but unlike the highly variable red squirrel, they are monomorphic, as there's not really much variable in appearance, with being very dark brown or blackish, with a light underpart, as you can kind of see going on here. Compared to red squirrels of northern Italy, these guys are also significantly larger. They get to about 280 to 530 grams, or 10 to 18 ounces on average, so they're about 35% larger than Eurasian red squirrels, which we'll be covering next. In terms of their habitat, they lived in the mixed forests in the highlands, and nests are often placed in pine or oak trees. They mostly occur near black pine, as the seeds are an important food source. The northern limit of its range has been found in northern Polio, but is sometimes spread north to the Lucan and Appendiz region. I think that's easy to say it. I'm not going to go. The northernmost limit is the southernmost Italian red squirrels, are separated by a gap of about 100 kilometers. These guys do have a stable population, but its small range means they're likely to qualify as near threatened, or even perhaps vulnerable. And the most serious threat is actually the Finlayson squirrel, which has been introduced into their range. So you've got to be very careful with that. Introduced species. We know what happens like basically in the UK when grey squirrels come compete with red squirrels. But yeah, really beautiful. Having a little interaction there. Where is a baby? I want to have a look at the baby. Is that a baby? Yes, that is a baby. That is a very cute little baby. Anyway, we'll look at the baby. We can say that we've done that. Alright, so next up, we're going to have a look at the Eurasian red squirrel, as I promised. We talked about it, and we'll do it. So let's have a look at the Eurasian red squirrel. There's one here. Really beautiful. Another great Leaf mod. So all of these squirrel mods were done by Leaf. Does a really awesome job. So the red squirrel. These guys are the Eurasian red squirrel. There is the American red squirrel, but they're completely different. And there's over 40 different described subspecies, but a lot of them are uncertain. I guess a lot of them, some have been given species status, as the Caribbean red squirrel, as we kind of talked about before. But a lot of them, it's just like the taxonomy is just not really sorted out. But they have a very wide range, so that kind of makes sense. A lot of them may be different species. The red squirrel has a typical head-to-body length of about 19 to 23 centimeters, or about 7.5 to 9 inches, and a tail that's about 15 to 20 centimeters, or 5 to 9 inches, and a mass between 250 and 340 grams, or 8 to 12 pounds. 8 to 12 ounces, and males and females are about the same size. Their long tail is tend to use to help them balance and steer when jumping from tree to tree and running along branches, and they actually keep them warm when they sleep. And the coat of the red squirrel, even though mostly red, can vary a lot during the time of year. There are several colour morphs ranging from black to red. Red coats are most common in Great Britain. In other parts of Europe and Asia, different coat colours will sometimes coexist within populations, much like hair colour in some human populations. So the underside is typically always a white cream colour, and they tend to shed their coat twice a year, switching from a thinner summer coat to a thicker, darker winter coat with notably larger ear tufts between August and November. So in terms of their habitat, they are found in boreal coniferous woods in northern Europe and Siberia, preferring Scots pine, Norway pine, and Siberian pine. In western and southern Europe, they are found in broadleaf forests with a mixture of trees and shrubs, provide a better year-round food source. And in most of the British islands, they tend to like broadleaf woodlands and are less suitable due to competition with the grey squirrels, though, so that's another big issue. And their population in Italy, Ireland, and Great Britain has been decreased because of the introduction of the eastern grey squirrel from North America. However, the population is stable due to conservation efforts. So in terms of the ecology and behaviour, they are found in both coniferous and temperate broadleaf forests, where they tend to make a dray or a nest out of twigs. They can form a dome structure about 30 centimetres long, or about 11 inches. It is lined with moss, leaves, grass, and bark, and tree hollows and woodpecker holes are also used, and they are typically solitary and are shy, recluse animals, particularly in the winter, with several red squirrels outside the breeding season may actually share a dray to keep warm. Social organisation is based on dominance hierarchies within and between sexes. Although males are not necessarily dominant over females, the dominant animals tend to be larger and older than subordinate animals, and dominant males tend to be larger home rangers than subordinate males and females. In terms of their diets, they mostly eat seeds from trees, neatly stripping conifer cones to get to the seeds within, but they'll also eat fungi, nuts, like acorns and hazelnuts, berries, vegetables, garden flowers, tree saps, and young shoots. And they will really do eat nestlings and bird eggs. And a Swedish study showed that out of 600 stomach contents of red squirrels examined, only 4 remnants actually contained birds or eggs. And they do create middens where they will cache food, either buried or in the nooks or holes of trees, and eaten when food is scarce. And although the red squirrel remembers where it created its caches better than chance level, its spatial memory is actually less accurate than that of grey squirrels. So between 60-80% of their time they will spend foraging, and they are crepuscular and often rest in the middle of the day, avoiding the heat of the day and that high visibility of birds of prey, to try and avoid that heat. But during the winter they will rest a lot briefer in the midday, and even the opposite entirely, where they just might have just kind of stay out of their nest for days looking for or may even just stay in their nest for a few days. And no territory claims between the red squirrel and the feeding individuals overlap considerably. Yeah, it's really cool, that spatial memory. So that means they're quite good at dispersing things, because they'll sometimes forget where they put things, and that can be a tree that kind of sprouts on its own. So a great way of dispersing things as well. In terms of reproduction, so let's have a look at the reproduction of these cute little guys. Let's have a look. Let's see if we can spot a baby. That's not a baby. Is that a baby? That is a baby. Let's have a look at you. So in terms of reproduction, mating occurs in late winter during February and March, in the summer during June and July, and up to 2 litters a year per female are possible, with each litter averaging about 3 young, and they're called kits. So gestation lasts about 38 to 39 days, and the young are looked after by their mother alone, as they are born helpless, blind and deaf, and they weigh about 10 to 15 grams at birth. Their body is covered in hair at 21 days, and the eyes open about 3 to 4 weeks, and they develop all their teeth at about 42 days. The juveniles red squirrel eating solid foods about 40 days after birth, and at that point can leave the nest and find their own food. However, they still suckle from their mother for about 8 to 10 weeks. And during mating, males will actually detect the female's estrus by an odour they produce, but there is usually no courtship. But the male will kind of typically chase the female, and sometimes multiple males will chase a female, and the biggest one kind of gets usually the largest gets the female. In terms of life expectancy, if they survive their first winter, they typically have a life expectancy of about 3 years. The individuals have reached about 7 years in age, and some even 10 in captivity. And survival is positively related to the autumn-winter tree seeds. On average, about 75 to 85% of juveniles die during their first winter. Mortality is approximately about 50% of them following the first. So in terms of competition, the boreal predators that they are eaten by include small mammals such as pine martens, wildcats, and stoats, prey on nestlings. Birds like goshawks and buzzards will take adult red squirrels. Red foxes, cats, and dogs can prey upon them when on the ground. And typically human influence and population size and mortalities by affecting their habitats. We destroy their habitats by causing road casualties, but also introducing the eastern grey squirrels in some areas that have destroyed their population. So the main reasons they do compete, they're not directly antagonistic, and violent conflict from the species is not a decline, but the reasons is the eastern grey squirrel can better digest acorns, while the red squirrel can't do that, so that means they've got a competitive advantage. They also can spread diseases to the red squirrel, that is like the squirrel papillovirus, which the red squirrel has never been exposed to. And when the red squirrel is put under pressure, they won't breed as often, but grey squirrels will breed more readily. But during the UK, and their population has fallen to 160,000 red squirrels or fewer, with 120,000 of them living in Scotland. Outside of the UK, the impact and competition of the squirrels have been observed in Italy, with 2 pairs escaping from captivity, and it has been observed, and well, hopefully they're trying to contain it, but in Italy at the moment, but there is potential that these grey squirrels could go into Europe. But luckily, there are projects to try and help. They are protected in most of Europe, but they are considered least concern. Although not under any threat worldwide, they can, in some areas like the UK and Italy, they are at risk of being outcompeted by the grey squirrel. And in contrast, they actually present a threat in New Zealand. They are considered a prohibited species, so they're not allowed to bring them in. And in terms of projects, there are lots of projects trying to help reintroduce them into areas where they're eradicated grey squirrels, and doing projections, to get rid of grey squirrels and help, their populations come back. So that's a cool conservation as well. And they're quite historic species as well. Some North mythology, Ratatoska was a red squirrel that tended to Yggdrasil, and they will usually be widely hunted for their pelts as well. And they're the national mammal of Denmark. So a lot of cool little facts about these guys. So they're quite important in human culture as well. But yeah, another really cool species. I'm definitely a big fan. So next up, we've got a remaster. So this remaster is done by Sea of Surprises. This is a remaster of Leaf's Orca. So we're not going to talk too much about these orcas, because we've already covered them a couple times, and there's a lot to say. But we are going to go kind of over the basics and what we know and kind of things like that. So really beautiful animals, really love it. And I like how sometimes you can see, like that. Sometimes they'll fold down like that. That's pretty cool. So that happens in captivity sometimes. We don't know the exact reason, but we'll talk about that later. So we've got the orca, or the killer whale. So this is the largest member of the dolphin family, and the only extant family in the genus Orcus, and they're quite popular because of their pattern, and that's how they're recognizable. They are a cosmopolitan species and inhabit a wide range of marine environments, from Arctic to Antarctic regions and tropical seas. So that's quite interesting. They're named killer whales because they were thought to be, they've been known to hunt larger whales, so they're called the killer whale. They're also sometimes referred to as blackfish, as they're not really fish, but they're big and black, so blackfish. In terms of taxonomy, there has been some debate what different species of orca there are. There's some people saying there was a 2024 study that tried to split orcas into 3 species, but it is potential, it's taxonomic issues with orcas everywhere, because some of them are races. A lot of them are quite different in terms of their ecology and things like that, and their relatedness, but they still, readily interbreed and things like that. It just depends on the study. Like some populations specialize on feeding on salmon, while others will prefer feeding on marine mammals like whales. So it just kind of depends. But we'll go on to. They're the largest members of the dolphin family, with males typically being about 6 to 8 meters, or 20 to 26 feet long, and weigh about 6 tons, while females are generally smaller, about 5 to 7 meters, or 16 to 23 feet, and weigh about 3 to 4 tons. But the largest orcas are typically about 9.8 meters, or 32 feet long, and females are about 8.5, with large males weighing over 10 tons. So it's kind of, the really big ones. And the calves are born at about 180 kilograms at birth, and are about 2.4 meters long at birth. So you can see they've got quite interesting pectoral fins. There is some sexual dimorphism, so you can see the males are bigger, but the males also have much taller. You can't really see it there at the moment, but they've got much taller dorsal fins, as you can see there, much taller. Kind of annoying with that angle, but we'll have a look at you while we get the chance. So let's see if we can zoom out. Come on, zoom out for me, please. There we are. Beautiful animal, though. So their pectoral fins are large and rounded. They look like paddles. and they're quite a little bit larger in males than females, so that's a bit of sexual dimorphism there. And they do have this counter shading going on that allows them to, sneak up on prey. They've also got quite good eyesight, and they have extremely sophisticated echolocation that allows them to find food similar to other dolphins, and they use sound to find prey, so that's quite cool. In terms of the habitat, as I mentioned, they're found pretty much all over the world in world's oceans. So you find them from the Antarctic to Antarctica. So the Arctic to Antarctica, so a very, very wide range, and there's lots of different types and populations of orcas. And the population over the world is thought to be about 50,000, but I'm not sure how accurate that estimate is. And there's lots of different populations and things like that, but it's very, very complicated. As I mentioned, the apex predators, so they all feed on pretty much anything, and some populations specialize on feeding on different things. Some will specialize on feeding on fish, others will specialize on marine mammals. Those tend to be open ocean orcas, for example, but they tend to do a lot of that. Some will, they'll eat penguins, pretty much anything smaller than them, and they will even gang up and kill blue whales. That has been observed multiple times. So they are quite a adept predator and kind of considered the apex predator ecosystem. They've even been known to hunt great white sharks and eat their livers. So they are very, very powerful predators. So in terms of their behavior, they are very social. They have very similar social structures, similar to like elephants or higher primates. So they live in social family groups that are matrilineal. So the females are the bosses, and then the males will kind of hang around and be a little more transient than them. And so the eldest female is the matriarch, and she'll take care of them. And she can live for up to 90 years, and there has been some recorded potentially over 100 years. But there is some, so the group of orcas is called a pod, and it's usually, as I mentioned, for matrilineages. But transient ponds tend to be smaller than resident ponds. It usually has an adult female and a couple of offspring, but they have very strong bonds, and they'll sometimes even join together and help hunt, bigger things. And to help with these social structures, they do a lot of communication. So they are very good at communicating with vocalization. So they make lots of chirps and sounds as well. So that's how they communicate. And they even have what's called a dialect. So they're able to. So each kind of dialect is unique to different pods, which is very interesting as well. I'm just trying to get you to zoom out. Why aren't you zooming out for me? Come on. I want you to zoom out for me. Come on, come on, come on, come on. In that, we'll move that on. But it's because they're a little bit too big to actually zoom in on. But we'll just zoom out. Come on, zoom out, zoom out, zoom out. There we are. So here is the lovely orca. So they are quite complex calls, and they will learn them over time. And each kind of different pod has a different dialect, and it's kind of a way to have important meetings to maintain group identity and cohesiveness. That's quite interesting as well. And being orcas, they are very, very smart. They have the second largest brain of any marine mammal, with the sperm whale being the largest. And they have more grey matter in their neurons and more contour neurons than the other mammal. That includes humans. So they're very intelligent. They've been known to learn how to steal fish from long lines. They've learned how to kill, whales and sharks and things. They'll often take sharks and then kind of twist them around so they've got tonic immobility to attack them as well. They've learned to push seals off of icebergs. So things like that, it shows that they're very, very intelligent, and that really helps with their survival. So in terms of life cycle, they tend to mature at about 10 to 13 years of age and tend to become most fertile about 20. Females will often breed until age 40, and then they'll undergo menopause. And they're one of the few animals that actually do undergo menopause and will spend decades living after they've reached their reproductive prime. And the lifespan is about 50 to 80 years, but some have been thought to live up to 100 years, but though biopsy samples suggest he was 80 years old. So they do live quite a long time. And mature males males will mate with females from other pods, which prevents inbreeding. So he'll kind of go and mate with a female from another pod, but sticks with mum. So they're really big mama's boys, which is kind of relatable. I'm a bit of a mama's boy. It's quite funny. But gestation will vary from about 15 to 18 months. And we'll have these cute little babies. We'll have a look at this cute little baby. So that's a newborn. I'm trying to get actually a good look at you. So look at this little newborn. No, I don't want to move you. I just want to look at you on the camera. That's what the newborn looks like. Very, very cute. He is coming onto land. He probably wants a bit of food. Obviously, orcas can't do this, but that's the limits of modding. Yeah, mothers who typically have a single calf every 5 years, and in resident pods, the birthing occur any time of the year, though winter is more common. Mortality is extremely high during the first 7 months of their life, with up to half of calves dying. But then weaning will begin at about 12 months and is complete by 2 years. And males reach sexual maturity at 15, but don't typically reproduce until 21. And while males live about 29 years on average, with a maximum of about 60 years. And actually, one male known Old Tom, which was seen every winter between the 1840s and 1930s of New South Wales, was thought to be about 90 years old. So they do live quite a long time. But in terms of their conservation, they are considered I believe they are considered vulnerable. I'll check what they are. Yeah, data deficient. There's just not a lot on them about their conservation status. Really just don't know enough about them. Some orca types, or some kind of groups of them, are considered endangered. Like endangered, like ecotypes. So I need to do that as well. There's certain populations or ecotypes of orcas are considered endangered. But so things such as depleting of prey species, pollution, oil spills, and habitat disturbance by boats are most of the threats that they face worldwide. Also, bioaccumulation of toxins, kind of since they're top of the food chain, that can be a very bad issue, like mercury in these guys as well. So most local populations face a few issues, but overall we don't actually know how they're doing. They're just not that well studied. But they are often, a lot of people were curious about them, and they've formed a lot of parts of human culture. So like indigenous people across the world have come up with different legends and stuff to do with them. And even though they often were historically depicted as quite dangerous, fearsome predators, while there's been no reports of wild attacks on orcas, very few attacks of wild orcas on people. But obviously they have killed people in captivity, which is kind of its own debate, whether they should be in captivity and all that stuff. They have known to attack sailboats as recently in 2020 and 2023. They have been known to attack yachts and things, and they've kind of been ramming them and trying to destroy them. They think experts were divided whether it was kind of like a revenge thing, or maybe just being playful and trying to try new things and being adventurous and playful, as smart animals are, including humans. And captive orcas have killed about 24 people, but in the wild they've never killed anyone that we know of. So it's either they're just peaceful in the wild, or they're just so good at killing people we've never known about it. But there have been human attacks on orcas. People, gone out and shot them before and hunted them. But typically they are kind of considered, in pop culture, they're considered a lot more, beautiful animals and smart and interesting. And lots of efforts to really help them. And as we've learned more about their social structures, people have kind of learned to love them a lot more and see them as beautiful, intelligent animals that they are. And they weren't really impacted by whaling, but they potentially largely ignored orcas because they didn't have much oil. But some of the populations that probably ate whales were hurt by this. And there was even a whale, Old Tom, that was actually swum alongside whaling boats to kind of help catch whales. So they're probably in some point they were useful for people, which is quite interesting, and cooperated with humans. That's quite interesting. And people love to go see them on whale watching. And they are commonly, not very commonly now, but have been kept in captivity, and that's been a whole debate of whether they should keep them in captivity and things like that. And I'm not going to get into that here because I've already kind of discussed it other times. I've talked about orcas, but still, really, really cool animal. Love seeing them. I know that they're a bit weird running around on land, but that's just Planet Zoo modding for you. And you can see another aspect of which is really cool about this mod, this flopping fin. We don't know what happens, but it is very common in captive orcas. But not as common in some areas. You'll find a lot of flopped dorsal fins in wild orcas. Some areas, like in New Zealand, I think it can reach about 23%. Other areas can be very low, but depending on where they are, there's higher chances of them potentially having floppy dorsal fin. We don't know what causes it, but it doesn't seem to be an issue in terms of health or anything. It just seems to be potentially there's like sort of gravity or things like that. We don't really know what causes it, but it's something that's it's probably gravity or something like that. That's what they think. potentially. But yeah, really cool remaster. Really nice to get a look at a nice Orca and Sea of Surprises. You know, definitely a surprise, and hope to see more from you. But next up, we've got Great Cakes mod back again. We have got here the Cape Lion. So this is a recently extinct subspecies or population, I like to say, of lions. So this is a population of the southern lion, or Panthera leo malachata, found in South Africa's Natal and Cape provinces, and it's thought to be locally extinct since the 19th century. And the type specimen was found on the Cape of Good Hope in 1842. And they were once considered a distinct lion subspecies. However, phylogenetic analyses looked into these guys and showed that these guys are closely related to southern and east African populations. And in 2017, the subspecies, which was originally just the Cape lion, kind of folded in to include all the other lion populations of southern and eastern Africa. And genetic analyses actually suggest they're not particularly distinctive from South African lion populations. As I'll get into, there's a little bit of interesting things I'll get to talk about. So these guys are based on a black-lined male individual specimen from the Cape of Good Hope, and were thought to be a distinct subspecies because of their mane. And the theory was then questioned as genetic exchange between lions, has been considered possible through corridors, and they're found to be genetically quite close. And I think as well, there is a lot of, they get bigger in southern parts of their range, so there is something called the Bergman's rule, where animals, when they tend to live at lower latitudes where it's colder, they tend to get larger. And you find that in the most northern and southern parts of Africa. There's kind of like convergence between Barbary lions and Cape lions, where they get darker manes and get more hairy and get bigger. So that's a great example of convergent evolution, in my opinion, which makes sense. The type specimen of the Cape lion is very large, with black edged eggs and a black mane as well, and the skull was described as being longer than equatorial lions, but really not too much different, and they were found to be bigger than Asiatic lions. Results of a long-term study looking into the colour of lion manes is influenced by climatic variations and varies between individual, with males manes being darker or longer in the cool seasons, with a 2023 study finding that the colour of Cape lion manes exhibited the same dark light colour variation found in other lions, like that mane colour was not actually quite distinctive in that population. So even though there was actually the original lion that I brought out had much of a tan mane, but this is kind of your typical Cape lion mane. But yeah, I think that makes sense in terms of the habitat. And Panthera leo is the Barbary lion. So it's different subspecies of different populations seeming to converge on similar morphology, in my opinion. But most regards, they're really not that different from other lions. They're just a distinct population. Even sometimes, not even distinct. They're a distinct population from the Cape of Good Hope. So these kind of Cape lions lived around the Karoo Plains in the Northern Cape. In 1844, they were sighted south of the Riet River and even the Orange River as well. And they believed the lions may have survived into the 1860s, but after that, potentially no. But then there were 6 lions kind of relocated from Abert Elephant National Park to Eastern Cape Province. But there are some in captivity. So descendants of cave lions were found in captivity in Russia, with 2 of them being brought from South Africa. He studied them and found that these Cape lions had larger size and things like that may have been taken, and actually believed that some Cape lions may have been taken to Europe and interbred with the captive population, with some specimens having a wide face and sturdy legs like these guys. And it is hoped that that back in South Africa they're trying and breed lions that look a little bit more like Cape lions, though DNA testing is done to establish whether the cubs are descendants of original Cape lions. So yeah, sadly because Spencer died in 2010 and the zoo closed, which the zoo is working in Vienna is called Boone Zoo, and Trelleborg Zoo, that kind of closed down, and the lions went to the Duckishin Lion Park. So yeah, a little bit sad there, but another really cool one, species that we get to talk about. And then we've also got here, lovely female. I like the remasters that have been done of the lions by Great Cakes. So yeah, definitely another awesome one. So let me zoom out. Hopefully it'll actually work this time. Oh, it doesn't seem like it'll be working. But no, it's working now. There we are. Perfect. So yeah, thank you everyone for making these lovely mods. I'm going to thank you. Thank you, Aquatics. Thank you, Great Cakes. Thank you, Leaf. And thank you, Sea of Surprises. Nice to see some new modders on the scene. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always look at the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye.